Welcome back. All right, it feels like we've had this discussion before. Feels like it's probably an annual thing, maybe semi-annual, maybe biannual. Anyways, uh the idea that players need to say more. Players are robots. Why don't players say more? Why don't GMs and coaches say more after their team lost? So I want to go to the NBA on this first. And I want to go to the NBA first because there's a good example of why players don't say anything that happened very, very recently. The 76ers lose out in the playoffs. A team that was seen as one that would go as far as Joel Embiid and James Harden would take them. And so after they lost, CBS Sports puts out a post of a quote from Joel Embiid saying, "Me and James, we can't win alone. That's why basketball's played 5-on-5. We need everybody to find ways to be better." When you use that snippet, it makes it look like Joel Embiid is saying, "Hey, it's not on Harden and I. It's not our fault that the 76ers lost. What about the other guys? There's other guys on the court. It's not on us." The reality is they clipped out a part that adds context. They clipped out that before this, he said, "I need to be better." He took ownership that he needs to be better. So what happens is you get this quote out there, and there were people saying, well, he was 8 for 29 in that game from the field. How in the world can he say that everybody else needs to be better? He needs to be better. What an arrogant, right? So this right here is part of the reason why players don't say anything. This right here is part of the reason why you don't get honest, candid conversations with hockey players. And there are definitely instructions given to hockey players on what to say, what not to say. And I go as far as to say in some markets, they probably get told, don't talk to this reporter and don't talk to that reporter. But this is the issue, right? So we all would like to hear a player after a game is lost say exactly what's on their mind and exactly where they feel things fell apart. I've made the jokes before, right? There's usually, I'll make up the fictitious guy Bill. It's all Bill's fault. Everybody in the room knows, yeah, come on, Bill, you need to pull your weight. Don't act like that. Don't look surprised. Like, we're not going to see that level of, I don't know if honesty is the right word, but that level of players telling us how they really feel, you know? And whether their opinion is accurate to what happened in a game or in a series is immaterial. It's how they feel. But that's the thing too. It's how you feel. And as a sports athlete, I would think it's very dangerous to right after a loss, you go, and this is one thing that drives me crazy, is that you just lost game 7. Let's say you lost game 7 in double or triple overtime, right? So you lose a huge game, and let's say that's it for your contract, or that's it for your career, or however you want to look at it. And then you've got all these reporters coming over and sticking microphones or their phones up to your face because they want to get a recording for how you feel in that moment. I'm sure there are players whose response is, I don't want to do this. And we've seen in sports where there are players who don't want to do those after game interviews or even pregame, and so they get fined about it. They get fined. Sometimes they sit there and their answer is just, "I'm here just so I don't get fined," or something along those lines, right? Now, for me personally, and I put these notes on the board more for myself than anything, which is why the board exists. Might as well mention here, the whiteboard is more notes so I can keep myself on track more than anything else. And during the recaps, it's so I can remember what I saw. But yeah, actions speak louder than words is something I put on the board because I think that's more important. I don't really care about what somebody says in a media scrum after a game. I don't really care if somebody gave an interview to the Finnish media and said, "I think my teammates are mean." I don't. I want to see the results on the ice. I want to see the results on the court if it's basketball, on the field if it's soccer, if it's baseball, if it's football. I want to see those results, right? And so the idea that they need to come out after a loss and give us, and I think this is really a media narrative as much as anything, because for the media it's about clicks, it's about getting the scoop, and having a player say something, everybody's going to be, "Oh wow, did you hear he said that?" So the idea that they need to be candid. So the Leafs get eliminated from the playoffs. Who was candid about their feelings going forward? Kyle Dubas. Who lost their job? Kyle Dubas. And in part because of what he said. Now, the idea that he sat there and he said, "I don't know if I want to do this anymore," and that means he has to be fired, I've had jobs where nobody wants to be there, so we could have all been fired and we would have gone out skipping and celebrating until we realized we didn't have a job. But even then, some still would have skipped and celebrated. The idea that, well, that shows he doesn't want to be here, and I don't want that. But I'm sure there are general managers that think about this decision. I'm sure there are GMs and coaches and players that are in a situation they don't want to be in. I'm sure there are players right now that play for, they're contracted to a team they're not a big fan of. And they're not happy. Maybe they're not happy with the way they treated teammates. Maybe they're not happy with how a coach got fired. Maybe they're not happy with the money on their contract, but they signed it, so they're not going to say anything publicly. But maybe they're looking back and saying, my agent was a fool, or I was a fool and I shouldn't have signed that. Look what that guy's getting. But you're not going to say any of that publicly. Because as soon as you say that publicly, you're greedy, you're not grateful, you're short-sighted, you're self-centered, and all this. So they can't give you the honest truth. And I think this is where the media narrative to me falls apart. They're not going to give us honest truth. I don't really pay attention to the pressers so much. Now when it's the Canucks and it's a tire fire, sure, I will pay attention to the pressers, but I know what they're going to say. And it's not like after the pressers are done and you get these articles with the snippets that I go, wow, I didn't expect that. That's extremely rare. You kind of know where they're going to go. You kind of know what they're going to say. We know we need to be better. This team, we like where we're at. We think we've got a good basis, a good foundation here. Or this was a real setback for us, but we know we're going to come back stronger next year. I really believe in these guys. We all believe in each other. We're not going to, we're not going to overreact. And it's much all the same, right? And the idea is, well, that's not honest truth. On some level, it probably is. There are probably players who say, look, we're a good team. We can come back and do it again next year. We believe in ourselves. And that's the truth. And yes, it's boilerplate and it looks very predetermined and staged in that they said it. But what else? What are the other options? The one thing that I always see too, and again, in this day and age, it's easy for gossip and speculation to take over. I'm putting on the board here, there are likely always guys who don't get along. You have a locker room of 23, 26 players, however many, depending on the time of the year. You're going to have your black aces during the playoffs. During the preseason, you're going to have a ton of guys around. There are going to be players who irritate you. There are going to be people you don't get along with. I have worked at jobs with less than 10 employees, and there's usually somebody out of the 10 who may not fit in. And sometimes if you're like, well, everybody else seems to fit in, you're the one. So the reality is that there's always going to be those guys who don't get along. And after a loss, that's going to be more pronounced. So this is why I've always said that when a team's on a 7 or 8 game losing streak and you start hearing about there was a fight at practice, I'm not surprised. Did you hear that these guys don't get along? I'm not surprised. They can hide it while they're winning. They can't when they're losing. So let's say you've lost 4 games in the last 10 days. You've played 4 times. You've lost all 4. So you get out on the ice for practice, and the guy who cost you 2 of those 4 games is out there. And maybe you don't like how he's handling practice. Maybe he hits you too hard during practice. And you're thinking to yourself, that is the hardest that guy's hit all year, and it's on me in practice. Oh, hell no. And then the fight is on. So I don't really think it's a big deal when there's a fight at a practice for a team that's struggling. Now, if it's a team that's having all kinds of success, that's more of a head scratcher, but that's normally not the case. These are athletes who are in the primes of their careers. These are athletes who are at the absolute pinnacle of their sport. And so they're very competitive. There's definitely egos there. I always find it interesting, too, when people get mad, oh, this player's got an ego. Well, yeah, the ego is part of what drives them to be the best. If you're going to get to the absolute top, you're going to have a bit of an ego about it. One thing I was told with broadcasting when I thought about getting into broadcasting, I know I'm doing the YouTube thing now, but when I thought about actually getting into the traditional broadcasting, I was told, the guys at the top aren't necessarily the nicest. You kind of have to stab some people in the back on your way up. And there were questions asked about whether or not I could do that. And my answer was, I can't do that. And so here I am as a YouTuber rather than being, reporter, DJ, whatever else I might have been. And that was part of it. That was absolutely part of it. Now, there were financial reasons that I didn't end up taking all the courses that I wanted to as well. But that's reality. Not everybody can afford to go out and get that, education that they'd like to get. The other side of it too was that, if you know that you're taking a 2-year course and you're going to come out and get a job that's maybe $10 an hour and you might be up north. There's a lot of things with broadcasting, but I digress. With hockey players, you've got guys who've gone through junior, gone through all of the lower levels, get up to the NHL. So you're going to have an ego. Absolutely, you're going to have an ego. And I don't think it matters which player on the team. I don't think it matters if you're Austin Matthews. I don't think it matters if you're a player who's fringe NHL, AHL, sometimes a little bit of both. I would expect there to be a little bit of attitude and a belief that I'm the best, and a belief when you get sent down to the AHL that what, they're going to regret this because I'm much better than this. And whether it's accurate or it's not, as a GM, you'd kind of want to have players with that kind of an ego. As a coach, you want guys to have that belief in themselves. As fans, as media, that would probably be seen as, wow, this guy's really full of himself. Did you hear that? He got sent down. He hasn't had a point in the last 4 games. He gets sent down and he says they're going to regret this. This was a terrible idea. And then, the guy complains about being sent to the AHL. The GM may look at that and go, well, so he's done then. Again, all Kyle Dubas said was, I'm not sure. And then there's other reasons too why Shanahan pulled the plug on bringing Dubas back as GM. But that was part of it, right? Him being honest in that moment and raw and saying, I this is not fun all the time. And it's not. I don't think hockey players are having fun 82 games a year either. I don't think coaches are having fun 82 games a year. But you have to go out, you have to say the boilerplate stuff, you have to say all the boring stuff. Because when we talk about all the boring stuff that just drives us crazy, that's what keeps them employed. That's what keeps things, and you can say that keeps things status quo, which is true, and in some cases that's to the detriment of the team and the organization. But these players are thinking about their jobs next year, coaches are thinking about their jobs next year, and GMs too. So while I'm sure there are players who are not happy with where they're at, coaches who aren't happy with where they're at, they have a job, they get paid, and they go out and do their job. And it's very similar to any of the rest of us. You may have a job you don't like, but you get up in the morning, you do that job, and you go home. And if somebody's honest with you and says, hey, so how do you like that job at that gas station on the corner? Your answer might be, this job sucks. I'm always working graveyards. It's always dark. It's always just, it sucks. This is a terrible job. I don't enjoy it. I sleep all day. I never get to see people. But you don't say that to the boss necessarily. And certainly you wouldn't say it to the press because then you're out of work. You're gone. So the poorly thought out comments I had to put up here because we've seen that. We've seen players, especially when it comes to the foreign interviews. So an interview is given in Russian, Swedish, Finnish, and it gets translated to English. And it may not translate very well. Words can be different in one language than another. And so, yeah, it may come out that, wow, this is awful. He wants to trade. He hates all of his teammates. And that may not be what was said. That may not be how he felt. And even if it is, it doesn't necessarily mean the guy wants to trade right away or anything. But we will, comb over that and discuss it and analyze it. And so, yeah, and then for the press, it's more meat for them. It's more red meat for them, where they know what will get people to read. And nothing sells quite like spoiled millionaires whining about their jobs. Look at these guys are spoiled. They're whining about, and they have a job that everybody would want. And in reality, I don't know if everybody would want to have a job in the National Hockey League. The pay'd be great. Don't get me wrong, pay'd be great, but some of what comes along with it, and again, not everybody's paid the multi-millions of dollars for this. And it is a lot. It is a lot to deal with. And if you're on certain franchises, you're going to get way more scrutiny than you're going to get elsewhere. So let me know your thoughts. What would you expect would be the best thing for a player to say, or do you understand when they don't say anything? Because I do. I totally do. I haven't done a video that I can think of ever on, oh, remember where this was said on that exit interview? Because again, players just lost. They just lost. They're done. Their season's done. And right away, they're expected to sit down in front of a bank of microphones and answer for it. And I'm sure there's players who want to curse and swear into the microphone and just leave. But if they do that, then they get labeled as pissy, and the media has a field day with that too. So at any rate, that's where we're at. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.